This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jess Dewell of Red Direction. This program 157, is called Foster Creative Thinking. You are in the right place for conversations about current problems and needs as business leaders face challenging and very quickly changing times. The discussion that I'm going to share today is one-sided. It is just me on this program, and it's going to add to the conversation of what it means to develop culture and tenacity and be an effective business leader today, right now, and in this time and space. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
So this conversation started out with a question. How do you encourage creative thinking within your organization? Now you're listening, you know we value audience feedback. We value the stories and experiences that you have because together it's what we do to define what a leader is today. So use hashtag VBBRadio and share your answers to the question, how do you encourage creative thinking within your organization? You can also visit voiceofboldbusinessradio.com, look up this episode, this program, and from there, share an experience however long a tweet is these days. So fostering creative thinking. The first step is that we must start our conversation with defining what creative thinking is, because sometimes creative thinking and critical thinking are used interchangeably. It depends on the shared meaning and the way we do business together within our organization. Critical thinking includes things like assessing what we already have, figuring out, improving something that already exists. Another thing that critical thinking is known for is that it's typically more analytical, right? There's a process or data that's being collected to evaluate. Another way is that it's focused on this concept of probability. We are probably going to get to this, or probably this is going to move us closer to our goal. And the other thing that critical thinking does is that it takes things that we already know to be true, truths in business, truths in our area of expertise from those that have come before us, truths in existence, and it applies those. Contrasting that is creative thinking. Some people define creative thinking as something new or original. It's also divergent from typical thinking. And another one is it's focused on possibility, what could be. And the reason that creative thinking is really necessary in organizations is sometimes we got to break the rules. And so you'll hear phrases like, rule breaker. Oh, that person has gone rogue. What is going on here? This is not how we do things. Well, when those types of statements come up, it usually means that there is a lack of creative thinking. We've forgotten that possibility exists. Another concept around creative thinking is that it has to be difficult, right? And as soon as we put this word creative around it, if we're just really good at our job and we know what to do and we're great researchers and we get results and somebody goes, come on, get more creative. It's almost like having that concept of writer's block, or just in general, all of a sudden there's this block, right? This block, how do we move forward? What do we do about that? What is the gist of what am I being told? Everything that we know and hold dear about how we do us in this moment has officially been questioned, and we're on uneven ground. Now, within an organization, typically, this means these types of feelings that would come out of left field from comments like that are directly related to people that are above us, that we want to please, that we are working to build relationships with because we have our own advancement paths planned and we're looking for things. And when somebody goes, come on, be more creative, or let's get creative, or let's do some creative thinking, it can be scary if we already think we are. And so I want to just bring in, right, this concept of awareness here, this personal awareness is that, okay, when somebody says that, we have the choice to respond to that. We have the choice to react to that. Usually the reaction is what I was just describing. The opportunity to respond is, okay, maybe there's something new here. And maybe we're looking for something that hasn't been found yet. How can I contribute to that? Has nothing to do with us. Never has really anything to do with us. It has to do with the fact that what we've been doing, and I'm speaking generally, what we've been doing isn't quite on track, and the path, though, is unclear. It also could be that things that we have tried aren't working, yet we know there's some sort of impact. We just need a greater impact quicker or with different resources. And so getting creative. This concept of thinking out of the box, I really don't like thinking out of the box, because who says there's a box, right? Well, that shows a little bit of my curiosity there. But this concept of awareness, all right, let's get creative. Well, what happens? Let's get creative. What does that actually mean to you? To me, when I say let's get creative, I'm asking specifically my team for ideas that have not been shared yet. That's different than taking an idea and iterating it into the next step. So I am very often always about the possibility. And sometimes I have to be reminded by the team, hey, but we don't need to think of anything new just yet. We've got other steps that we can take to further this before we know if we are on the right track or not, if we're on the path to the impact that we would like to create. It's great feedback to have, because if we only live in the place of possibility, we're always looking for what's next. And if we only live in the place of tried and true, do what's been done before, follow a pattern, it's going to get stale, and at some point we'll quit working. Both are useful sometimes, and neither are useful all the time. On Tuesday's show, we talked about this concept of shared meaning. Fostering creative thinking is a different type of collaboration. It's a different type of value and the way we do business together. And when I think about creative thinking, when I think about being something new, I also think about where exactly are we in the matrix of businesses that do what we do at Red Direction? That's a very valid question. And in fact, to be able to answer fostering creative thinking concepts, how do you foster creative thinking, directly goes to which part of the market are you in? Are you the leader? Are you somewhere else? Are you the most cost effective? Are you something else? Are you the most expensive? What makes you the most expensive that people are willing to pay you for that, right? And I'm saying the word expensive. We could use the word value or quality or any other word there. So go with the flow on that. And it'll change how we are creative. If we are the low-cost, do-it-yourself option in our world, when we get creative, we have to get creative in a way that allows us to keep that place, because we have decided that's how we solve the problem. We're in that place in the market. So how do we get market share is going to be shaped by what we've decided our solution is. And how do we get creative about that? There's a great book called Blue Ocean. That's the concept of looking beyond what you know to find new markets or expanded additional markets where you can find market share and still do what you do best. Because one of the things that creative thinking tends to elicit is this idea to expand, to offer more services that will attract more people. That's always an option. And with that is the slippery slope of dilution. And that's something that's hard, because when we're trying to expand market share, how do we become more attractive to more people? I'm going to share a story. And in this story, this actually has really happened. I'm going to be as vague as possible because I think it's a useful story. I think the thinking was right, even though it didn't work out. There was an organization that wanted to increase market share. They're looking to increase the people who were interested in participating in what their organization had to offer. Okay, so we're talking membership here. In this membership organization, this product, this service that was being offered, the growth was not there for the offering that they already have. And what they decided was, we need a new group of people, because that will solve our membership problems and we'll just get new people. It's logical thinking. It's the next step. Some people would call it a pivot. Some people would call it starting over. Some people would call it market expansion, because maybe we just haven't found our right market yet, right, within this organization. The questions that came up for me listening to this story and evaluating this concept, it's the same thing being offered to different people. And if it's the same thing just being offered to new people, What's going to make these new people like it if the existing market isn't buying? There was no answer to that question. The second question was, this other group of people is going to need a different infrastructure, will want to communicate differently, is very interested in a kind of communication that the organization doesn't engage in right now. So what makes going after that market the solution to a problem when the infrastructure to support that's not there? And in fact, the infrastructure to support communication with the existing membership, I'm going to use the word poor, has poor adoption. So when you're facing contraction, it's easy to go after, oh, well, let's just go to a new market. We just haven't found the right people yet. Or we've exhausted the existing market and we need a new market to continue to solidify what we're working with. The other piece of that is, well, it's flawed. It's flawed because it's like the easy, obvious answer. So there, if I come in and you're sharing this story with me and this was your organization, one of the things I would say, I probably wouldn't say, let's get creative. What I would probably say is, what problem are you trying to solve? And once we know the problem that's trying to be solved, we can find out, is the problem still valid and necessary? Or is there a declining number of people that actually have this problem that this membership solves? Well, it's pretty cool to think about that. It's pretty cool to go, yeah, okay, but it's also hard. It's hard because we don't want to ever think that what we're doing is declining in need. It's hard to think that something that's passionate to us, that we're passionate about, isn't exciting and inspires and connects with other people. That's hard. The thing is, we've all had ideas like that. I've had one. It was called Biped Bios. The concept was, there are stories out there, we just don't know who they are. And in this world where we move faster, we're in sound bites, we forget to ask the question. We may not know how cool this person is. We may not know the experience that they bring. And Biped Bios was to solve that. I was the only one that was interested in that, okay? The actual stories behind the people, not the genealogy and who they were, but the stories that would make somebody that you found in your genealogy useful and worthwhile and get to know them, and some of more heritage through actual people that aren't famous, right? We can find famous people in our genealogy and go, oh, cool, we're related to them. We can figure out what they know. But everyday people that are just working hard, people that are just doing what they do, people that are adding value and contributing in some way by being alive and having the experiences and making the life that we live today possible because they came before us. Very fascinating to me. And there's probably something out there that takes care of that these days. Well, when I started, there was not. And also when I started, I didn't figure out how to talk about it. So it was my passion, solving a problem that I wanted to know. And I wanted to know cool stuff about everybody in the world. There were not enough other people like me to actually contribute the stories to make that happen. It was really hard for me to let that go. I'll be honest. It was something I was super interested in and I care a lot about. In fact, I was very lucky to know my great-grandparents all the way up until I was 18. My great-grandparents started dying when I was 18 years old. I knew 4 of the 8 of them. And that's pretty neat. And now I'm looking at my son, right? My son is 7. And he actually has met 4 on one side and 3 on the other of his great-grandparents. Now he's got 3 great-grandparents on each side that are living. And it's a cool thing to be able to stop and look and listen and just be around, because sometimes there's not really cool conversations that happen. And when you're 7, by the way, when I was 7, I didn't care what my grandparents or my great-grandparents were saying. It was just cool to be around them. It was cool to share a meal with them. It was cool to see them with other family now and again and just be around and to be in the space that they lived in every day. And that experience was very interesting to me. And in fact, it's probably because of that I had that interest. And now when I get to see my grandparents, so my son's great-grandparents and my grandparent-in-laws and my son's great-grandparents on my husband's side, I make sure to stop and listen and ask questions and see how things are going. And it is amazing what we can learn about those people just a couple generations ahead of us and how they solved problems and how technology, okay, this is kind of cool, right? We're talking about creative thinking, and how technology has so much facilitated this concept of problem solving and information gathering that we use our brains differently. And in fact, there are pieces of being creative and figuring something out, and what does figuring something out look like that has changed in just 2 generations. When I ask my grandpa a question, okay? So my grandpa passed a year ago in February. He was very into space and science and math and very technical, and was a machinist for the Air Force, both as active duty as well as retired and as a civilian. When NASA sent up the Hubble Space Telescope, and there were all these problems with the telescope when it first was sent into space, my grandpa couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out how the scientists missed that, and he wanted to see. And so what he did was he went and he found the blueprints. And then he took those blueprints and he made a scale model that was the size of maybe a large dinner plate or a large cutting board or a platter, something like that, right? 3-dimensional. And when he got done building it, he was like, I see it. I see the problem they have. Interesting. And so here it was. Sometimes the way to get a handle on what's going on is to really understand what you're working with. And we as a society today don't take the time like my grandpa did to actually figure out what the problem was to be able to solve it. We just go, oh, there's a problem. What can we do? What's the easiest way? And we pause for a split second instead of pausing and trying to recreate the problem, trying to think through, right? So he built to think through the problem. Some of us can use our brain to think through the problem. Some of us might write to find the problem. But do we really do that these days? I mean, when was the last time, and I'm going to totally ask this question, when was the last time that you stopped to ponder something that you wanted to change and actually thought about the reason it wasn't working, the problem that was preventing the result or the lifestyle or the action or the outcome that you wanted? One step to fostering creativity is to stop and to actually understand the scope of what the problem is. And not only the scope of the problem, and that was 2 things combined into one. Let me piece those out. There are 2 pieces. Stopping to understand and figure out what exactly the problem is. And then looking at what's been being done, and is that actually the process to solve the real problem? Or is there a different problem being solved than is the actual problem? Therein lies some discrepancy in results. The thing is, if we're on one track and we're only working this one track, when we're asked to get creative, we typically stay on that one track because the whole purpose is to keep going, keep going, keep going. When in fact, we could pause and say, okay, there's really a problem here. So what do I do? How can I figure out if this is really the problem? Or are we just addressing some sort of symptom and not seeing results? Because we haven't gone deep enough. We haven't articulated it. We haven't figured it out yet. That is a way to get creative. We can figure out and explore and see what is the possibility that we're actually solving a problem that needs to be solved, or solving a problem that will help us achieve whatever goal we want. What becomes possible becomes known through not only reflection, also dreaming. What is possible? How could we do what we're going to do? And listening to these shows, I tend to fall in the latter category. I'm all about possibility. I'm all about trying something out. I'm all about throwing out an idea and seeing, okay, what are the pros and the cons of just the idea itself? And do we have a good idea yet to do something with, right? What's possible next? What's possible next? Another piece of that is balanced out in part of the Red Direction team is, how do we measure that? What would the plan look like to implement that? Do we have the time and the resources to get to the goal that this idea has? And I will tell you what, tons of my ideas get shelved, stopped, poo-pooed, tossed out of the running because the timing that we're looking for to achieve a larger goal is out of alignment with the concept and the path and the outcomes of the idea. Now, that's a really hard thing as a leader to take because, right, we want to set direction. We want to know what's going on. We want to own our role. We're also trying to instill creative thinking in those around us. And if we refuse to hear what other people's experiences are, we're not allowing them to really fully realize that part of creative thinking, another step of creative thinking, is to hear what else there is to say with all of the different experience, whether it's from our mentors, whether it's from our board, whether it's from our executive team that we're working with, whether it's from our employees, whomever it is, opening our ears and not only hearing the words, but listening to what they mean and asking questions then about the experience to fully get where somebody else is coming from, expands our thinking, which allows us to now go, oh, our team, this project can really benefit from maybe not everything that's shared, but if one thing comes out of listening to what other people have to say when they have something to say, it's really important. And that means there's got to be safety, right? Safety in the ability to speak up. Safety in the fact that there will be no repercussions, right? There won't be a negative comment. It won't be passive aggressive. It won't be ignored. Now, it may not be used. That's very different than shutting down a concept, because as soon as anything is coming in that shuts down that conversation, the people who have something to say are going to stop saying. And when they stop saying, they're not going to be happy. And when they're not happy, they're going to leave. And so as responsible business stewards, it's up to us to recognize and create a place for those people who have something to say to be able to say it. The other piece of that is sometimes they're exploring possibilities and bringing possibilities to the table. And sometimes they actually have experience in a very different capacity, yet that experience could apply to some of the possibilities that your team is thinking about. So fostering creative thinking is bridging the gap between what is somebody's personal experience and what is the goal, and how can those two things come together and benefit from each other. And in fact, this is total aside. The total aside here is that one of the things that Red Direction does is that it's industry agnostic. And what that means is, it means that Red Direction has clients in many industry sectors. The point of that is because to be curious, we have to keep being fueled at Red Direction. And one of the ways to do that is to look at the experiences in different industries. Because each company that Red Direction works with, and your company, right? We may or may not have worked together yet as you're listening to this program, and your company is unique in some way. It has a unique offering. And the more unique you can be in the positioning of that, the easier it is to find the people who want that type of solution in a specific format that they are looking for. That's how you find your audience. And when you have somebody that's an industry expert in a particular thing like positioning or marketing or process for an industry, there's a lot of value there. Boy, is it deep. It is deep, 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 deep. Thing is, it kind of falls in the other category. It's analytical. It's based off of past principles and what's worked. And when it's followed hook, line, and sinker, that one expert that works with many people in your industry means that many people in the industry are getting the same information. And depending on how it's used and incorporated, there is a possibility to dilute your message and become more aligned with and indistinguishable from our competitors than we realize. And creative thinking can take that industry expert's knowledge and depth and awareness and usefulness to your organization, and then expand it out to the possibility that you find within your team. So I love industry experts. I love their depth of process, of how you might get financed, of what people are actually looking for, how they might find your company, and then being able to take their knowledge and expertise and apply it in the way that fits with the possibility and the goals of where you're going, that support the values of your business, of how you do business, and the way you are delivering that product to your customers. And that brings us to the third piece of creative thinking, which is creative thinking is fantastic. And being able to throw out ideas is awesome. And we all have this idea of ideas. We can put them out there. We can see what happens. We have no idea what's possible until we get them out there. Okay. But how do we filter them? So even within creative thinking and all these possibilities that we could put out, and we actually have these brainstorming sessions, right? We've all done this. We've all had meetings where we figure out how to brainstorm, and we put every idea, no matter how good, no matter how ungood, it might be onto this whiteboard, and then you kind of start figuring out how to prioritize them. Well, yeah, how do you prioritize them? So the third part of creative thinking is, okay, once you've got all this data, then what? And how do you want this creative thinking to be used? Do you want people to just do this brainstorming all the time, and then it falls onto us, the decision makers, to figure it out, put it together, and give it back? We can. That's typical. Which means we tend to forego the brainstorming piece and just come up with a vision and let people problem solve and come up with mini ideas to make the process that's been decided better than it could have been. And I want to change that paradigm a little, right? No, I want to change it a lot. I want to say we take those brainstorms, and everybody knows what the brainstorm is about before the meeting. And anybody that wants to bring an idea and put it on the board not only thinks of all their own ideas, but then they actually think about the beginning, the middle, and the end. And they get to the end of the idea and go, yeah, here's the idea, here's the outcome. Yeah, that's creative. It's different than what we're doing now. Yeah, I'm going to take that to the meeting. So instead of having 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 people showing up with many ideas to put on a board and then figure out, what if we set it up differently? What if we actually had a process that encouraged creative thinking on their own? And then you've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And instead of having 100 ideas, if there are 20 people in the meeting, maybe there's 20 ideas. And it gives everybody a chance to share their idea, the beginning and the middle and the end, so the desired outcome. And then they get to give their opinion about that. Because what does that do for us, right? That for us as leaders and the decision makers, it allows us to give more independence to our people. It allows us to go one step further and say, hey, this is how we work together. We're more than an idea factory. We're an idea factory that's focused on outcomes. And that outcome might be totally different than what the original goal is. The point being, some of those outcomes actually further get us closer to our goal than looking at just what the goal is itself. And that's where our position as leaders, decision makers, dealing with the ambiguity of business and what might come at us at any minute, that allows us that gives us space to do that, because we are not only fostering creativity in our teams, we're also fostering an element of critical thinking, because we want them to have more than ideas. We want them to take ownership of the concept that their work and their idea actually impacts the whole business, the whole reason we're here, the whole reason we're working together on this thing. Okay, I'm not excited or anything. I just got off a soapbox, or got onto a soapbox, so I'll step down. So the concept, right? The third one is, how do we get people to show up to the meetings that they're already thinking about the business, not just ideas that might be different or that somebody else might be doing or that we could build on that somebody else has already tried, right? It's that beginning, middle, and end. It's that looking at an idea's potential outcome and how it impacts the business in a positive way. And then what can be evaluated? Then as decision makers, we get to lead the team of the process. We get to apply filters to figure out which one. By the way, this is creative thinking, because what ends up happening, in my experience, 2 or 3 ideas end up becoming the final idea. And everybody is coming up with ways of how these different ideas that come together for a particular outcome actually work together to get farther down the road than anyone by themselves would have. Now we're talking about collaboration. We're talking about a willingness to come together and put these ideas together and see. And as leaders, we're seeing who's connecting the dots, who's comfortable with the risk that's there, who's not comfortable with the risk, what's known and available as resources, what resources are unknown or unavailable. Going through that process gets us down to a handful. Well, a handful's still too many. So what if we overlaid our business values on top of that? What if we overlaid what the objective is, right? So we've got our business values. We're going to show up this way and we're delivering this expectation to our customers, and we want to be consistent in that. all the ideas at this point, since we're doing it in a different order than I typically talk about, we'll probably have that already built in because we've got that shared meaning. We're using that collaboration. We're all coming together that way. And so maybe another filter, if that doesn't work, because all of the ideas that are left, even when they're combined a little, we have more than one or two, we can actually look at how they add value. What's our long-term goal? Is our long-term goal to increase the length of time we have relationships with our customers? Is the goal to increase overall value of the company and the profitability of the company? What is it to do? Are we adding value or are we creating value for the company? Or are we solidifying that added value to the company's bottom line? Whew, lots of value in here. Because when we think about what the purpose of the goal is, our short-term goals for the year, right? Year to 18 months, but then our medium-term goals, 3 years to 5 years. And then our long-term goals, what are we doing to ensure that we are sustaining ourselves down the road? And another way, possibility, through creative thinking comes into play is that we get to think bigger. We get to think about the things we know our customers like and want and need. We also get to think about how the changing industry, how the regulations, how technology, how opinions and the political and economic climate around are impacting the way people interact with our business. And when we have those little feelers in place and people are able to share, I keep hearing this thing come up. Or being able to use your own data, right? We're collecting data through CRMs, and we're collecting data through ticketing systems, and we're collecting data through reports. What data can we mine out of what we're collecting in addition to what's being talked about in the larger sphere digitally? And how can we apply that to the objectives that we have? These are just little things that allow us to be creative, to think about possibility, to think about what's next in addition to what's now. Ooh, I like that. At the same, creative thinking allows us to think about what's next in addition to right now. When we have ownership, we want to do more. When we don't know how to do something, we tend to power through with the skills that we have that have gotten us as far as in the success that we have and keep using those. And when we take the time to explore, when we take the time to seek out additional information, when we take the time to rethink a problem, when we take the time to allow others to think about a problem, and then together we think about a problem, and we get creative, we're creative within a framework that is designated for how we do business together, that is designated to stay on mission and continue to deliver the product to the people that need a solution to their problem that can be provided by our companies. So what we're talking about with fostering creative thinking is building an open-mindedness, more tolerance for risk. We're also teaching essential skills that allow people to be better people in addition to producing more for our companies. Problem solving is an underrated skill because of whatever reasons you can think of, right? We all have our opinions about that. This concept of having a problem, even if it's tiny, having a big problem, being able to own it as a problem. Challenges could be reframed as problems. And problems can be reframed as opportunities to learn. And in the end, sometimes a problem just needs to be solved so that we can keep a business going. And sometimes we want to reframe things in the positive, and that diminishes the need to look at it closely. And we end up with elephants in the room. We end up with unwritten agreements that we avoid certain things, and we only live in one plane. And when we're talking about business, there are multiple planes, and the more that the plane that we live on is built in awareness, the better off we are. And we have the completely unaware plane, right? The concept of, I have no idea what's going on. Things just go on. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work, but they work more than they don't work, so it's all right. And if something stops working enough and it hurts, I'll think about taking care of that or looking into it more. And what happens? Our teams do the same thing. They shoulder the weight. They don't say things that are actually happening. They leave the patterns that they may see to themselves or completely unsaid. And that's a loss to our companies because it's all about the patterns. if we're not liking the results and it's hurting and we want to change, now we have this level of awareness that we could go, okay, so how do we know what the problem actually is? Well, then we have to what? Watch, look, listen, use our senses, and find the patterns. By the way, finding patterns is like being open-minded, is part of fostering creativity. So what are the patterns? Is it a particular meeting? Is it a particular way that words are being used? Is it a particular process that's breaking down? Communicatory, technologically, through governance and interpersonal communications, conflict resolution, developing treaties between our people. All those things are important. Another piece to this concept of awareness is that once we can see patterns, we can intervene when we choose. There will be a moment in time that we realize, I see it, and if I do nothing, we're going to go down the same path and I'm going to observe the same pattern I've now defined and identified. Yet we could try something new. And so part of creative thinking is willing to experiment, willing to talk about and try something different, right? Goes back to this risk-taking, an expansion of an ability of risk. And risk could be monetary. Risk could be time intense, right? Whatever is acceptable risk in your organization, encourage your people to meet that risk and get a little uncomfortable. And you'll find the people who will go a lot farther than that too, which is great for the entire organization because people with higher risk tolerance can think bigger, have more possibility in their thinking, and be able to be guided into how we work together to deliver this product so that they get to develop the skills that they need to hone not only their willingness to take risk, actually maybe start identifying the risk that's at stake. That's a skill we could all benefit from. And usually we need the help of somebody outside of us to do that. So we think about creative thinking, right? We've talked a lot about this. We've talked a lot about what it means to go through the process, some ways to instigate. I'm going to use the word instigate on purpose. Some creative thinking, which requires more structure, which is funny because structure seems the opposite of creativity, doesn't it? Yeah. So you're creating a structure for which to allow ideas to come to fruition that a team could use and walk through together to find the best idea right now that also will benefit in some capacity a future goal, a future state of being 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. Thanks for listening. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and you can find program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P157. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 157. You can also search the site for Foster Creative Thinking. Make sure to subscribe and rate the Voice of Bold Business Radio. And if somebody that you know is struggling with fostering creative thinking or they're stuck themselves, share this episode with them. Not only that, go ahead and hop over to reddirection.com and check out Unstuck Quick as a solution. An extra set of eyes, a small time frame, something that you can invest in your business right now for some expanded thinking and help you foster creative thinking in your business. Effective leadership means we can't just do, we also can think. We can't just do, we also develop other people. And to do that, we can share with each other. We can share experiences, our stories, our ideas, and define what it means to be a leader today, both in being open and vulnerable, as well as having practical application to use. So share with us, how do you actively foster creative thinking?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.